Welcome to another episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded. I am one of your hosts, Cecily Petrie, joined as always by my co-host, Erik Prado. Erik, how are you?
Doing good, Cecily. How are you doing? We are coming up on our extended holiday weekend, Labor Day weekend. So looking forward to for some nice deserved time off. But yeah, how are you doing?
Exactly. I'm well. I know it's kind of that bookend of summer. We have the two holidays, and I feel like it's approached a little too early this year, but fall is always a nice season. So I'm not going to complain that we're leaving summer behind, but it's been really nice. And exactly, the long holiday weekend is always a great time to just refresh and recharge.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll have to look at our archives, but I feel like too we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of when you started hosting. Am I wrong? Am I right?
No, you're right. You're right. Because I remember it was right before my wedding in September last year that I started. So, exactly. It's probably right around that 1 year mark. So, happy anniversary
Nice.
to me, I guess.
Yeah, happy anniversary to you. That's awesome. Yeah, it's been great having you co-host. We've produced a lot of good episodes that listeners should check out. We've had a lot of good guests since Cecily started hosting, and we have a good schedule coming up too. So be sure to subscribe so you can be notified of when those episodes are released. But yeah, with Cecily, we have a good one today that I will hand off to you to kind of introduce us and our listeners to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Eric and I had the pleasure of connecting with Peter Bade, managing attorney of Corporate Immigration Partners, Envoy Global's affiliated law firm, to discuss a recently released U.S. corporate immigration trends report. So, this report is an essential resource for both HR and mobility professionals navigating today's complex immigration landscape. So, amid shifting policies, budget constraints, and evolving workforce demands, our report really delivers that data driven look at how employers are navigating corporate immigration in 2025. So, taking a look at emerging trends to industry best practices, these insights will really help you benchmark your program and refine your strategy. Peter had great insights, and some of the key things that we discussed were policy changes being a top concern for employers, as well as, with increased RFEs and companies choosing to initiate the green card process sooner rather than later. Immigration budgets are top of mind as we move through 2025 and as we're entering into 2026. Any other kind of key points, Erik, that you wanted to discuss to give people kind of a little glimpse into the episode prior to listening?
Yeah, thanks, Cecily. Yeah, I think there's two things that really stood out to me. I think, oh well, I guess three. I mean, first, just echoing what you said. This report is an essential resource for corporate immigration and global mobility professionals, and anyone else really in the global mobility space who is curious about corporate immigration. It's the 10th year that we've released the report, and so it's nice to kind of see how year over year things change. But really, it's a nice gauge of just how employers are feeling, and obviously, the report comes out. This year's report comes out at a unique time with change in administrations, which obviously means a change in immigration policies and things like that. And there's a stretch in the episode, probably close to 10 minutes or so, where Peter's just listing off a bunch of policies that have changed or things on the immigration side that have changed since the middle of January of 2025. And I think just hearing him kind of list what has changed just highlighted, you know, how every day is a new day. And just, all aspects of corporate immigration are kind of under the microscope. And so it's very important for employers to, ensure that they are on top of the news, they're checking their resources, and just, staying aware of what's going on. One thing too that Peter I also found interesting is that within our report we did ask a few questions on policies that support talent. acquisition. And we found that fewer employers are considering benefit reductions in 2025. The number is a drop from 2024, which was also a drop from 2023, which kind of shows that Cecily, I don't know if you recall, but I think it was like the summer of 22 or 23 where we just saw like a bunch of layoffs in various industries, but in particular the tech space. And so as we asked this question, we saw that employers were, cutting benefits, but now it's kind of going back down. So I found that interesting and whatnot. But Peter did mention, and everyone can read this in the report, where even if employers are considering benefit reductions, there are potentially a lot of reasons as to why. Um, you know, he cited, lack of venture capital and angel investment funding. Obviously, with interest rates, being held steady, uh, companies are just a little bit more cautious. Tariff policies are having an impact on quite a bit, and just shifting consumer spending trends. And which upon hearing, you might be like, well, how does a consumer spending impact corporate immigration? But Peter lays it out and everything. It's just very interesting to think about like these like things that we're hearing about in the news, one by one or individually, kind of all layer up and impact everything. So I just found that very interesting.
I agree. I think just in general, having candid feedback from an immigration attorney on the report and what we're finding in the immigration and mobility space is just really helpful in a unique way to kind of digest the report in a more conversational manner instead of just looking at some of the data, also
Yeah,
having some of the conversation around it as well.
definitely, definitely.
And now here's our episode with Peter Bade, managing attorney at Corporate Immigration Partners, discussing Envoy Global's 2025 US Immigration Trends Report.
And joining us on this episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded is Peter Bade, managing attorney at Corporate Immigration Partners. Peter, thank you so much for joining Cecily and I on today's recording. We are very excited to talk to you about a big release from Envoy Global, which is the 2025 U.S. Corporate Immigration Trends Report, which we'll be going over shortly. But Peter, thank you so much for hopping on, and how are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you, Eric and Cecily, for having me. Yeah, happy to chat about the Immigration Trends Report and talk about any pertinent topics there. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, yeah. Cecily and I have been chatting, and we've been looking over the report, and we're very excited to have you on because new this year, you, along with some of your colleagues at CIP, contributed some awesome analysis on some of the findings from this year. So we're excited to go over that. Yeah, in a little bit, Peter, we'll head into that. But just really quickly, just wanted to ask you a little bit about your background in immigration law and just kind of how you got into this field, how long you've been practicing, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been practicing business immigration law for over 10 years now, maybe close to 15. And how I got into this field was I started off as right after college, I was interested in going to law school, but I didn't know like what type of areas of law there were, to get into. I didn't have like a family member who was an attorney, so I kind of had no idea what attorneys did. And it just so happens that when I was applying for jobs out of undergraduate school, I got a job as a paralegal with a business immigration law firm down in Los Angeles, and one of the bigger known names in our field. And I had a wonderful supervising attorney boss, and the other people I worked with were great. And I saw how she worked and her schedule, and I saw how she really impacted people in their lives, right? Because I think the main thing about business immigration or immigration in general is, it's not just putting pen to paper and filing these paper applications, but you're actually impacting someone's lives. You're giving them the opportunity to come and work in the U.S. for their family members to come over to the U.S. and get a green card. So I thought that aspect was pretty cool, and aligned with my ideals and values. And so I went off to law school, tried different areas of law, but eventually decided that I wanted to practice in this area. and graduated from law school. Started off with a smaller business immigration law firm, and just kind of worked at different law firms since. I mean, I worked at some of our bigger competitors, such as Fragaman and BAL, but came back to CIP because it's sort of that more personable, bespoke feel. I think that service that we provide to our clients. So.
Awesome, love to hear it. Over the course of your career, I guess what has maybe been what has maybe been the 1 to 2 things that you've learned the most, or just some insights that I think for listeners and viewers that you just want to share.
Yeah, I think it's really, again, going back to what I was talking about, it's not just paper, but really impacting lives. So I think that's really made me aware as I continue to practice to be sort of customer service, client focused, just taking appreciation and realizing that, I'm not just signing off on any paperwork or form, but, this is the application that's going to get them that H-1B visa to come and work in the U.S. This is the application that's going to get them, when approved, get them the green card for them and their family, and start their American dream, and so on and so forth. So I think that that's one of the things that has stuck with me in my career. And I think the second thing is, you're going to make mistakes no matter what. Maybe your paralegal forgot to do this, or you missed this when you were reviewing that application. And so I think it's a matter of how you recover from those mistakes, rectify the situation, and make sure that those don't repeat itself and happen again. I think that's also sort of a critical thing I've taken away.
Thank Thank you for sharing those. And I think with that, I'm going to kick it off to Cecily to tell us a little bit more about this year's U.S. Corporate Immigration Trends Report.
Perfect. Thanks, Erik. As you mentioned at the top of the call, we were excited about this release and excited to share it with other immigration and mobility professionals. So Envoy Global's 2025 Immigration Trends Report really offers key insights from over 500 HR and mobility professionals on how US companies are adapting to shifting immigration policies. So, amid stricter visa vetting and new restrictions under the second Trump administration, employers remain committed to global talent. So, investing in sponsorship, streamlining the process, and supporting international hires. As policy and geopolitical changes continue, the report helps organizations benchmark their program and stay agile in a complex immigration landscape. So, with that being said, Peter, I think one of the key findings that we were taking a look at in the report in talking with these immigration and HR professionals is that policy changes are a top concern. So 20% of employers cite that US government policy changes. That's their number one challenge that they're currently kind of going up against, so to speak, in the immigration space. So that heightened visa vetting that I mentioned, that expanding the travel restrictions, and then the stricter compliance requirements are reshaping corporate immigration strategies. So, taking a look at that, how are you seeing companies prepare for potential policy changes under the current administration?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Cecily, and I don't think it's surprising that we're seeing this heightened concern by um, companies and clients about policy changes and how that impacts their immigration program. I mean, we have a current administration in place that during his first term, he curtailed and put up several blockers to business immigration. I think we're starting to see some of those blockers, those impediments, if you will, in his second term. I think a lot of those sort of concerns and policy changes have not always been formally announced in terms of publicly facing USCIS memos or other publicly facing documents, but I think rather it's something that we're seeing in our daily and my daily U.S. immigration practice. Just to give some examples, we're starting to see an increase in H-1B requests for evidence, specifically, asking us to justify why a particular H-1B petition for an employee is a specialty occupation, meaning having to show that that H-1B role requires a particular bachelor's degree, and justifying why that particular bachelor's degree is applicable to that particular petition or application. We're also starting to see scrutiny from USCIS on employer signings and dating USCIS filings and petitions. Whereas before, especially during the COVID-19 lockdowns, USCIS was very accepting of scanned signatures and dated documents and applications and petitions. What we're seeing now is more of an ask for original wet signed documents. So that's a huge shifter policy change, especially for a lot of practitioners like myself who work remotely, and especially for a workforce and our clients who have embraced sort of that remote culture given the COVID-19 lockdown and pandemic. So I think this is leading to some of my practitioners but also my clients opting to electronically file USCIS benefits and applications where it's legally allowed. It's not allowed for all applications, but for certain applications it is. And in other instances where we're getting these RFEs or even sometimes notices of intent to deny on this signature issue, some of our clients and employers are having to scramble to refile applications to avoid a gap in the employee's work authorization. Um, the other thing I think we're seeing in terms of a policy change is changes in the 60-day grace period for employees. So typically, when an H-1B employer, for example, lays off an H-1B employee, that employee does have a 60-day grace period to sort of wrap up their affairs and leave the U.S. or change to another valid U.S. immigration status, or within that 60-day period from their layoff, look for a new H-1B employer to sponsor them for an H-1B visa. Previously, where the employer that has laid them off has submitted a request to withdraw that application due to the layoff, that has not impacted that 60-day grace period for that laid off employee. But now what we're seeing is when the employer does submit that withdrawal of that H-1B during that employee's 60-day grace period, sometimes that laid off employee is now getting what's called a notice of intent to appear before a U.S. immigration judge to presumably initiate deportation proceedings for that laid off employee. And so that's a little disturbing. That really disrupts that employee's opportunity to use that grace period to seek new employment with a new H-1B sponsor, or even change status to another valid work authorization or temporary stay visa. Um, Lastly, I'll just end in terms of policy changes. What we're also seeing is a curtailing by the Trump administration of humanitarian programs that allowed for certain foreign nationals to get work authorization or work permits. So we're seeing this in the context of two particular, and there's more to come, but I would say the major ones we're seeing this for are temporary protected status for foreign nationals from Haiti, Venezuela, El Salvador, Honduras, for example, and also United for Ukraine, which is another humanitarian program that granted work authorization for Ukrainian refugees coming from the war-torn countries to work in the U.S. And so a lot of those programs are not being renewed under this administration, and as such, those employees' work authorization will not be renewed. So they're facing sort of a deadline in terms of trying to figure out and scramble and see if there's another work authorization that the employer, company, sponsor can switch them to, or potentially have those employees leave the U.S. And either offshore them to a subsidiary abroad, or unfortunately terminate their employment. So those are some things that we're seeing on the RFE side. On the visa vetting side, we're seeing a lot of restrictions and tightening there. You mentioned the travel ban, which is a huge one. In early June, President Trump reintroduced the travel ban. We saw a version of that during his first term. And this current travel ban limits entry, with limited exceptions, but limits entry into the U.S. Of nationals from Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. And it also restricts entry and travel for some foreign nationals on visitor visas, trainee visas, student visas coming from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. Again, this is a huge disruption for companies wanting to bring employees who are in those countries over. And this list is a living document, right? It could be further expanded at a moment's notice, or decreased at a moment's notice, depending on the administration's desires. The other thing that we also saw this year in terms of visa vetting and restrictions was restrictions on F1 students. We saw earlier this year the Trump administration and Secretary Rubio seek to remove and sort of cancel F1 student visas for those that they saw participating in last spring's, protests and demonstrations that we saw. It was all over the news. Campuses were bustling with protests and demonstrations over what's going on in Palestine and the situation over there. Um, so, any sort of social media, any activity that F1 students might be doing that may be seen as anti-Israeli, but also anti-American, are undergoing strict scrutiny right now. And in some situations, earlier this year, we saw those students actually deported. Um, Another situation that we're seeing is with respect to F1 Chinese students. Earlier this spring, Secretary Rubio announced that he would regressively revoke F1 student visas for Chinese students that, were had strong ties, that showed strong ties or connections to the Chinese Communist Party, or alternatively were studying in critical sensitive fields, which actually was not defined by the administration what those fields were. But we did see some of this happening. Anecdotally, I've had colleagues who appear to have had clients, F1 students who were working in the U.S. Under a STEM OPT or OPT EAD card, work authorization revoked, and those folks having to go back to their home country due to either having ties to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in sensitive fields. And then I think just in general, what we're seeing, not surprisingly, in response to some of President Trump's earlier executive orders from January on extreme vetting for visa renewals, we're seeing an increase in 221G administrative processing. So, folks applying for visas are getting stuck and getting their visas issued to them and having to stay abroad longer, sometimes due to security background checks or even due to crimes they may have committed earlier in their past that were not an issue under the previous administration. So these might be small crimes like DUIs or petty theft that typically would not have raised an issue, but are now sort of coming up to haunt and result in delays for visa issuance for our clients. Also, an increased scrutiny, like I mentioned, of social media activity, looking to see if the visa applicant has, participated in any anti-Israeli or quote unquote anti-American protesting or putting anything out there on social media that may be seen as anti-American or anti-Israeli. And then the other thing we're seeing too is just, a lot of the posts tend to ebb and flow in terms of, having a particular period where they want to, deny a lot of visa applicants or let a lot of visa applicants in. So I think what we're seeing right now is sort of this fickle approach where some of the posts in particular, for example, Chennai, some posts in Brazil, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, seeing a huge visa denial rate for L1B applicants for people applying in these consulates. The same would also go for TNs in Mexico. I think we're also seeing a higher increase of TN denials for applicants applying for those visas in Mexico. And so, and lastly, I'll just finish with the other policy change in terms of vetting. We are also going to start seeing come September 2nd, the consulates abolishing a waiver of the in-person visa interview requirement. So whereas before, certain applicants who were low risk, who were applying to renew a visa, certain applicants who are 14 years of age or under, so children, and certain applicants who are 79 or older, so elderly, typically those folks have been waived or not had to go in person physically to a U.S. consulate to apply for the visa. That's going away. Again, that's part of this stricter vetting. So pretty much everyone applying for a U.S. visa, with the exception of people renewing a tourist visa in certain situations, pretty much everyone, children, elderly, everyone, even if you're going to renew the same visa, will have to appear in person at a U.S. consulate to get that visa. And what does that mean? That means it's going to be longer wait times for these foreign national employees to get a visa appointment, to get the visa, to apply for it, and just longer wait times in general. So I'm encouraging my clients, and I think they're telling their foreign national population to apply as soon as possible, to apply earlier than before, to renew their visas as needed. So yeah, and the other thing I think I'm seeing, how to prepare. You asked about preparing for potential policy changes. Given the travel ban countries I mentioned above, I think I'm seeing my clients curtail hiring or bringing people over from those particular travel ban countries. Alternatively, given the expiration of certain humanitarian programs, I've seen them start to not, start to lay off those particular employees and not seek to hire those employees who are in the U.S. working on a work permit or visa that that humanitarian program might go away in a couple months. Again, seeing that sort of action taken. Um, on the H-1B side, I'm looking at some employees looking to, pay higher wages for their employees to avoid a RFE, or potentially to have a higher selection rate in the H-1B cap lottery for next year. And I'm also just seeing clients start the green card process a lot earlier too. One thing we didn't talk about, which I know we'll get to, the green card process is just taking a super long time right now. And so seeing a lot of companies want to start that earlier and get that done earlier so that potentially they have that runway and can continue to stay and work in the US on a green card versus a temporary visa.
I think you touched on one piece that we wanted to cover was, we're seeing that those increases in RFEs. You mentioned one response you're seeing that your clients are kind of driving in on is maybe increasing that salary and that wage. Any other responses that you're seeing or that you're advising your clients and how they're handling those increases in RFEs?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, just taking a different approach in how we prepare the applications and petitions, taking more thorough approach, I should say, maybe making a more robust application. So where the application was maybe yay thin, it's maybe a little thicker because we're including more evidence, more arguments, sometimes securing independent expert opinion letters to justify, for example, why a role is a specialty occupation, why this particular degree is needed. In some other instances, maybe we're getting more specialized educational evaluations to more carefully tie the employee's work experience and education to a particular H-1B role, so that there's sort of that harmoniousness, that the actual education background makes sense for the particular H-1B role. Um, I think in some situations, some clients are also utilizing premium processing where possible to get a decision sooner, to avoid delays and gaps in work authorization. But also sometimes as sort of a preemptive approach, so that way they know, okay, if we get a decision and the outcome is this, it's a negative outcome, we can pivot it and go to option B for our strategy for this employee's work authorization, or stay in the U.S. as it may be. Um, so I think those are some of the key things that we're seeing. I think you mentioned audits. On the audit side specifically, we're for worksite enforcement audits by Department of Homeland Security fraud and detection agents. I think what I'm seeing a lot of clients do is putting more robust practices and policies in place, such that the appropriate protocols are in place, such that if they have a random uh, DHS, USCIS fraud officers show up at the employee's H-1B worksite, that there's a point of contact already there at the worksite who knows what to say to the officer, who knows what documents to present to the officer, and who knows what to do, X, Y, and Z, to make sure that that particular inspection is conducted legally, under legal compliance, and under the laws.
Yeah, that's helpful and makes sense in terms of, wanting to have a thorough strategic approach to managing your immigration population, especially when we're seeing, higher scrutiny in the immigration space in general. Leading into that in terms of what you're kind of thinking that we could anticipate for further changes as we're looking, to the next year and 18 months. Maybe it's something that we're looking back at Trump's first administration, understanding what took place in those additional 12 to 18 months from starting and to looking at the second administration and what you're kind of anticipating that we might see as it relates to immigration and visa changes.
Yeah, I think I think we can expect changes. I think it's very unpredictable with this administration. I think we saw that with the first administration, and, seemingly unrelated to immigration, it seems like there's a headline or something coming out from this administration every day, whether it's related to the economy, tariffs, negotiating a treaty or peace agreement with Russia and Ukraine, or whatever it may be. There's always something new coming out, I feel, with this president. So never a dull moment, but I think we can expect changes. What I would predict, and again, this isn't exhaustive. I'm sure there's more that I'm missing as well. But with the travel ban, I think that could evolve and change. The current list of countries I would anticipate would not be stagnant. That could change, and that potentially there might be more countries added to that travel ban. So something we'll have to wait and see on that. I think, with the current visa vetting protocols that are in place, just more increased scrutiny on visa applicants, more increased scrutiny on the social media activity of visa applicants and what is considered un-American or anti-Semitic, right? That's kind of subject to interpretation. So more discretion, potentially more denials in terms of visa applicants because their activity has been deemed non-American, anti-Israeli, or they've got these crimes that they committed in the past that were innocuous before, but are turning around to bite them, for their renewal or initial visa application. I think with respect to that, with respect to everyone having to go in person for a visa interview, I think we're going to see longer wait times for people to enter the U.S. and get visas to enter due to these vettings. So, that what's that going to mean for U.S. employers? Longer wait time for those employees to come to the U.S. to do their jobs, to fill those work mandates here in the U.S. So, and then also just I think we'll see more increased worksite enforcement, audits, that sort of thing, and more I would say requests for evidence. I think it's coming. Um, you know, uh, more justification as to why this H-1B role is needed, why this person qualifies for the H-1B, for example. So more of that to come, I think.
And I think strategically, it seems that, if employers haven't already, it's the right time to be taking a look with your immigration provider and really taking a look at your program as a whole, coming up with those plan Bs and plan Cs, just to kind of be up to date on how things could change so quickly, and really having those plans in place should you need to kind of change your route a little bit as you could say. And I think from that point, it's a great time to kind of roll into another key finding from the trends report is and a key topic that people were wanting to discuss is budget and benefits as it relates to immigration. So I think Eric, perfect time for you to kind of take over and discuss that with Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Cecily. Um, I think first, Peter, appreciate you just kind of recapping some of the things that have changed in corporate immigration since the start of the year, and I had to remind myself that it's only August 20th, and just
It's a lot,
hearing
yeah.
it's a lot. I guess as it relates to the first part though, so as Cecily mentioned at the start, in our survey of over 500 random HR professionals, the top challenge, they cited what were was policy change from the U.S. government at 21%. If you were to maybe put on your magic hat or whatever, would you expect that number to go up in the 2026 survey?
I would think so. I would think so. Again, just going back to with this current administration being so unpredictable and wanting to sort of put up some blockers and barriers, if you will, to um, U.S. legal immigration, business immigration in particular.
Hmm.
I think if I could step back just from a policy or political perspective, if you will, I think the current administration feels like they have a mandate, if you will, driven by the election wins to one thing, curtail the illegal immigration, secure the border, right, which he's doing obviously, or he's taking actions to make sure that it appears that he's doing that at the very least. But also, I think also to sort of make sure that on the U.S. immigration legal side that it's working such that it's not disadvantaging U.S. citizens and U.S. people here in the U.S. So I think what we'll see is more of this, more policies come out in the coming year, or at least until his term is done in 2028, to sort of maybe slow down, roll back, or try and curtail the legal business immigration side of the coin. Um, so I do think that we'll probably see that number potentially increase in the coming year.
Yeah, I would think it would increase too. But looking at a different section, which you contributed some analysis to in this year's report, budget and benefits. Peter, first question slash topic, compared to when we were looking at last year, this year when we asked the question 2025, twice as many employers are starting the green card sponsorship process within 3 months or less of an employee's start date. Um, Can you talk a little bit more about why companies are starting green card sponsorship so soon? And I think you alluded to it, but I think it'd be great to dive into this question a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the main thing just has to do with how long it takes for a foreign national typically to go through the typical green card process and get their green card, Eric. It's a very long process, and for some foreign national employees, particularly those from India, sometimes China, but usually India. I mean, we're talking about a 10 plus year wait for an Indian foreign national to get the green card through company sponsorship. So that in and of itself is just why a lot of companies are wanting to start it a little earlier than normal. Tied to that is, a lot of these employees who are getting green card sponsorship, um, you know, a lot of them are Indian foreign nationals, but just in general, a lot of them are on what's called the H-1B visa. And the H-1B visa has a limit of 6 years of stay and work authorization that the employee can stay and work in the U.S. for that particular H-1B employer. There's certain ways to extend that 6 year limit. One of the ways being is if they've met certain milestones in their green card process. And so, given that the green card process can take so long, the employee is wanting to make sure that milestone is met so that they can extend that H-1B visa for that employee beyond that 6 years up until that employee gets the green card. So, given that scenario, that's one of the reasons why we're seeing them, um, start a lot earlier. Um, it's a three-stage process. The typical process, the first one being the perm labor certification stage, showing to the Department of Labor that there's no qualified U.S. workers who can fulfill this foreign nationals role. From filing to getting that first stage approved, it's 2 to 3 years just for that stage, and there is no premium processing of that stage you can do to get a decision more quickly. Um, and then again, for those born in India, for example, they have to uh, wait. So typically, the way that the green card allocation system works is that there's a certain number of visas that are allocated every year, every fiscal year. They're kind of broken down by where you're born, and a lot of it's based on green card demand. I think it's all other countries, broken down by all other countries: China, Mexico, Philippines, and India. Sometimes there's other countries that play into that. But if you look at the wait times for India, it's a fairly long wait, and so because of there's high demand, and so just because of that, that long wait, that 10 plus year wait to get the green card. I think you're seeing a lot of employers want to start that sooner rather than later, so that employee doesn't maximize or max out that 6 year H-1B limit.
As employers are looking at the green card process and starting it, either within the 3 months of an employee's start date, within 6 months, or even immediately, what budget slash financial considerations and support should employers be mindful of when starting the green card process?
I mean, the overall cost of the process is very expensive. We're talking about an average of $10,000 for the green card process itself. And the other thing too is there are certain parts of that green card process, mainly the perm labor certification stage, that the employer has to pay for legally. So that's not a cost they can pass on to the employee as part of the green card process. So that stage can run close to five, six, seven, $8,000 in and of itself. And so again, that's a cost. If the employee, it's a cost that the employer wants to consider, because if the employee were to potentially look at another company and maybe jump ship to another company, that could be a lost cost for the company because they've invested that in the client or in the employee. And so that's something that the company might want to consider, in terms of retaining the employee.
Yeah.
There's also dependents too. If the company has a policy of sponsoring green cards for the employee's spouse or child, those can run, an additional $2,000 to $5,000 per dependent. And then also just the additional costs, like I mentioned, the long wait times, especially for foreign national from India, for example. You have to extend the underlying work authorization for that employee while they're waiting to finish and get the green card, which can take 10 plus years. So you're going to be filing extensions of the H-1B for that employee, and those are not cheap either. Those are $5,000 to $6,000 potentially per H-1B extension, and then if you're going to have to extend the dependents, the H-4 dependents, you're looking at maybe another $1,000 or $2,000 per dependent. So, it can add up. It can add up, obviously, in terms of keeping that employee work authorized while they're waiting to get the green card and just the overall green card process itself.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point about companies covering some of the green card costs. This year's report, we found that 38% of employers cover all green card fees and do not seek repayment. Meanwhile, 58% of employers cover all fees but have repayment policies if an employee leaves. So I guess Peter, well, really real quick question: when employers are potentially thinking about, instituting a repayment policy or not, what questions would you recommend they ask themselves internally to determine, said policy?
Yeah, I think first of all, they do want to make sure that they talk about that with Labor and Employment Council and their Immigration Council as well to make sure that they're abiding by the immigration and employment labor rules. If they want to put a clawback policy in place to recoup costs, as I mentioned, the perm process, it's pretty black and white. It's pretty clear that the employer cannot pass those costs and force the employee to pay for that. So that's something that is a no-go. But in terms of that, I think the consideration that an employer should also have is, what is industry standard or market? Not all maybe competitor firms are doing that for their foreign national population. So I think you also want to make sure you don't run the risk of potentially putting off an employee to go jump ship to another company that doesn't have that in place. So as to retain that particular employee. So I think that's another. I think retention, weighing the cost of retaining that employee versus putting something in place is something that also the employer needs to weigh out.
Right, right, definitely. One other topic that you have mentioned a few times since we started recording has been premium processing. And in this year's report, we found that premium processing is widely used, but it is facing cost pressure, where 87% of employers use premium processing for visa petitions like the H-1B, but 43% have reduced the number of premium processing applications submitted over the past year. Peter, why do you think the number is that, 43% have submitted fewer premium processing applications?
I think it goes back to the cost. I mean, we saw the premium processing. I've seen in my lifetime premium processing go from, I think at one point early in my career, it might have been less than 1,000 to 1,000 to 1,500. Now it's 2,805, almost $3,000. And we could well see the filing fee, the costs go up beyond $3,000. These filing fee costs go up every year. It's only going up, not down, from what I've seen. So we could be at a point where it could be 3,000, maybe even 5,000 at some point for premium processing. So that's just a very cost prohibitive thing for for some smaller employers, and even for some larger publicly traded companies. It's just when you're if you're trying to do premium processing for all H-1Bs, for example, for all your foreign nationals, for every H-1B applications, transfer, renewal, H-1B cap, and if you got 1,000 H-1B employees on your roster, 2,805 or 3,000 times 1,000 adds up pretty quickly. And so that's a big budgetary concern and hit to the immigration budget for a lot of companies. And so, it doesn't surprise me that it's decreased, but I think the cost is sort of the main driving factor. Now, again, I think it kind of goes back to, what is the cost benefit analysis of the cost to the budget for the company versus retaining the employee? How important is this employee to retain? And please, is that something that we want to, cut that cost, but potentially lose retention and employees' satisfaction to go to another competitor? But again, I mean, if you're seeing the industry overall reduce that, then you're kind of doing what the rest of the companies are doing. It's sort of status quo, I guess.
Yeah. If I'm putting on my pessimistic hat, if you will, you mentioned the premium processing cost keeps going up and up. It almost wouldn't surprise me if the cost keeps going up as a way to deter employers from submitting those premium processing applications, therefore increasing the workload of USCIS, therefore kind of like slowing the entire business immigration system down, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think that's a good perspective, and that could very well be a reason potentially why this administration might be looking at increasing costs and fees. So,
Final question I have for you, Peter, on the topic of budget, benefits, etc. We are a few years removed from that summer of it was dubbed the summer of layoffs. I think that would have been 2022, where it just seemed like every company, just kind of looking ahead at the economy, was making moves and reducing benefits and things of that sort. In this year's report, while down from 2024, we found that 62% of respondents have said that they are looking into um, reducing, or sorry, determining their benefit reductions. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe some things that you're seeing and hearing of what factors that maybe go into determining benefit reductions and why employers would look to do so?
yeah, I think a lot of it just kind of depends on, and this is pure speculation. I think it also depends on what kind of company or employer we're looking at. If it's a public company, for example, are they needing to reduce benefits and cut costs to make their annual reports look good for shareholders, so that shareholders have more money in their stock. And therefore reduce internal spending and reduce immigration budgets as needed internally. So I think that's one thing to also consider. And I think the other thing too is, again, it goes back to sort of this cost benefit analysis in terms of competition and industry standard. If one company here is starting to reduce these immigration benefits for employees, if Google is reducing the immigration benefits to their employees, is that something that Facebook is doing? Is Apple doing that? If they're not, then it's a retention issue too. I think if they start doing this and these other companies are still offering it, I think you might see a lot of talent jump ship to Apple or Meta or whatnot. Conversely, if everyone's doing it, if Apple's doing it, Amazon, Meta, if they're all doing it, then I think at that point it's sort of a level playing field, and so you don't run into that issue of worrying about, gosh, if I reduce this and everyone's doing it, then is this everyone will I lose this person if they're not doing it and I'm doing it? So
Yeah.
I think that's something for a company to consider. But I do think also just considering the current economic climate as well. Are we looking at a situation where hopefully this doesn't happen, but we can never be sure. Like, are we heading into a recessionary period or depressionary period like we were in 2008? And everyone's sort of tightening belts and every company's laying off. And just uncertainty as well. Our companies wanting to sort of um, take a more cautious approach, and take like a wait and see approach given economic uncertainty due to maybe VC funding is drying up, or maybe um, the administration's current policy on tariffs is creating uncertainty in various industries and economic sectors, or is it a situation because we're not sure what the Federal Reserve is going to do with interest rates, that you're seeing more companies take a wait and see approach, and therefore maybe internally reducing benefits across the board, but oftentimes to maybe the immigration program first, because that's sort of the lowest hanging fruit, if you will. So I think it's a number of factors. A lot of it obviously out of our control.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I do want to take this moment to rephrase the original question. I got my numbers mixed up. So
Okay.
in 2025, it is 51% of employers are considering reductions, a notable decline from 62% in 2024 and 72% in 2023. So just want to clarify that part there. But Peter, I do appreciate you kind of mentioning some of those other factors that could potentially go into benefit reductions. Right? You mentioned VC funding drying up, current interest rates from the Federal Reserve, tariffs. You mentioned we're seeing headlines every day from this administration, and I think it's a reminder that all the headlines we're seeing are in some shape, way, or form connected, and have the trickle down effect. These decisions have these trickle down effects. So yeah. Well, I do want to be mindful of time, Peter. And Cecily and I really appreciate you hopping on and talking about this year's trends report, some of the results we found, and kind of tying it to some other industry findings and analysis that you have. So as we look to wrap things up, just want to leave the floor open to for anything that maybe we didn't hit on, anything that you wanted to expand upon from earlier, anything like that.
I think I'll just say, hang on to your seat with this administration. I'm sure, especially nowadays, more to come. A lot of changes on the immigration side, the business immigration side in particular, my practice area. I'm sure we'll see a lot more in the coming 12 to 18 months. And for our listeners out there, whether you're an HR person or a foreign national employee, it's always wise to seek the sage advice of immigration counsel. So if you're not already engaged with someone on some of these changes that may be impacting you now or may impact you in the future due to future policy changes, always good to engage with someone. Obviously, you have us at CIP Envoy as well. So again, just thank you for your time and wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Peter. Cecily, anything that you would add as we wrap things up?
No, I just think in closing, I mean, this report is a great tool for those HR and immigration professionals to strategically benchmark their immigration program and the policies that your organization has in place. So, we'll link the report in the show notes for people to download, and we encourage you to do so, so that you have this data in front of you after listening to Peter's insights.
Awesome. Cecily, Peter, thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.